All right, welcome. I'm doing this a little earlier. I'm going to line up the questions. There we go. Oh, it's not letting me put them in this way. Darn it. All right, welcome. I am trying to line up the questions that I'm going to ask and put them in the comments, but it doesn't seem to work. I am really, really pleased to do this. This is a Q&A on Thoth, but stemming, it seems, from the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. As a recap from the last, this is the second of two parts based in this bunch of questions I got from one viewer. The Emerald Tablets are an extraordinary document channeled by Dorial, purportedly written in tablet form and hidden in the Great Pyramid in chambers that we have yet to access, or at least publicly access. There are chambers, there are long shafts out of the Queen's chamber in the Great Pyramid that there was a robot went up one and found a blocked door. And later, and that was in the 90s, and later a more advanced robot went up and the door has changed. So it's quite plausible that some governing body has gotten in there and learned from them. Purportedly, these tablets were there. Whether or not they're in tablet form, it's a wonderful window into Thoth, into the greater reality of this world we share. And I'm honored to be able to offer more information, more insight about them. So the first question in this series, I'm going to back up one question because I was inspired to share a little more clearly. We are living in a story. This is something that spirits do. It's something the earth hosts. And honestly, I've never had a better metaphor than kind of a giant, very creative amusement park of sorts, where you can't access everything until you learn to do this or this. There are lots of hidden chambers. There's much to learn that you can't see. And you could just, sort of skirt through and move on. You could invest more deeply and invest more deeply still, and eventually be shown some of the greatest mysteries that are available. So a very important piece of this is our relationship to what's known as Atlantis. Now, there's a lot of pretty factual information out there that you can research on YouTube that in the past couple decades has come to light. Basically, 12,800 years ago, a meteor hit the ice sheet. A lot of the ice broke off all at once. The sea levels rose plausibly several hundred feet. That is easily equatable to the Great Flood that's present in so many cultures have stories about a Great Flood from times before. And given that we now have meteorological evidence of it, right there, sinking or flooding when the water rises. Now, every civilization that developed in ancient times developed on the coast. So it's not remotely difficult to access physical awareness that any civilization that was developed and advanced at that time would have flooded. Then you move on and you start researching all the amazing historical sites around the world that we really don't know that much about. Basically, they reverse engineered a lot of their answers, whereby there's a ton of sites with massive, massive stones. Still no plausible explanation for how these stones were moved. And they've been dated at 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. Why? Well, because obviously civilization didn't even exist before then. So they reverse engineered it. When you start to look at them in this light, it's very easy to connect them to a civilization before all the civilizations we knew of. And then you start researching Göbekli Tepe, where they have factual evidence, because this site in southeastern Turkey was buried intentionally in tons of rubble, so they could date carbon material that is buried, next to the stones, and they know that it's at least that old. And given that they know that it's at least that old, and it dates to 12,000 years ago, we have definite proof that a civilization of that level of complexity existed then. Moving into esoteric. Thoth answers questions about this, and the Emerald Tablets talk about it. They said basically as Atlantis sank, he and many others came and met the beings, the people that were living in the land. And they were, described as something closer to barbarians of sort, and they learned to intermingle. And that fits really well with our understanding of Göbekli Tepe, where the evidence is that the most advanced aspects of Göbekli Tepe happened when it first was built. It was used for 1,000 years, and the last modifications are less advanced, less evolved. Totally fascinating. Why does this matter? When I talk to Thoth, he basically emphasizes that everything that happens on Earth is serving multiple purposes at once. Atlantis, as we've known it, is closer to an idyllic life on this planet than anything we know of. To cherish living in the beauty of this Earth, to travel all over, to be in a relatively unspoiled landscape with massive forests and ecosystems and clean rivers, oceans you can just enjoy as you travel across them. From the perspective of the cosmos, from the perspective of the solar system, this is what is awesome and sacred about living on Earth. So the Atlanteans had this amazing balance where they developed enough technology to build amazing structures that lasted long periods of time and to be able to travel all over the world. And they didn't muck it up with lots of factories and da-da. Everything that's happened since then essentially designed itself around patterns that were seeded through Atlantis that are inviting many of us to return to a time such as Atlantis. In order to embrace this, we have to commit to helping to restore the Earth. Human beings have destroyed on so many levels the beauty of this planet, and it's up to us to heal her. And bear in mind, we're thinking in terms of commitments that last multiple lifetime incarnations from now. So you have to be able to think in terms of 1,000 years into the future and multiple lives that you may live, if you so choose. This invitation is available, and it is the most amazing thing I've seen. In all of my wanderings and all of my explorations and every being I've learned from, this is the unique opportunity that's available here. To explore, you can wander, you can get yourself to astral travel to other planets with your body here. But that's not the point. Every planet has its beauty. Every planet has its multiple layers of experience that you can have. And we are here. So once you are here, to be fascinated by what's happening elsewhere, maybe you're calling, but to me, I'd love to cherish the best of this. And I get to see the invitation. You have to want it enough just to see the invitation to come deeper. One of the aspects that got me there was crop circles. I love them. I've been enthralled with them for a long time. And if you just spend time looking at them, don't think much. Just pay attention to what it does to you. The beings that make this, the spirit that makes this, and there have been plenty of light balls witnessed making them, they don't even kill the corn or the wheat, or the grass. They bend it, they heat it and bend it without killing it. Think about that level of cherishing the sacred uniqueness of life on Earth. That draws me into this beauty and this possibility. All right, now I'm going to go into the questions. Forgive me, I thought I had them lined up perfectly, but here we go. I am in a dark room and place a circle on the floor, and I stand in, this is from the Emerald Tablets, and I stand in it and speak the magic words that you know of. Wouldn't I tumble to the ground while I'm out of my body, which would snap me back into my body? Well, no, not if you prepare yourself. Not if you prepare yourself. So the standing flower practice that I do is the best way I know to center yourself. And it all alone is enough to get you centered energetically in such a way that you could do some basic out-of-body traveling to sort of dampen your expectations a little. I've done a ton of out-of-body traveling, and I've accepted essentially a relationship where I do a lot of it without visuals, because there's a real danger in being enthralled with places that are somewhere else. The experience of leaving this and finding somewhere else is dramatic all on its own, but that's an eternal dynamic. So every time you experience something new, there's an element of excitement in that newness, but once you spend enough time there, it becomes normal also. So the real challenge and the trick of committing to being here is to be able to cherish everything that's here despite how normal it is. So by all means, learn to explore a little, but you really want to use your ability to explore simply or primarily to gain perspective on being here. That being said, get in your body. Get your body, get your body, get your body. Get your energy tuned to your body, get your mind tuned to your body. Be present here. That will accomplish what the source of this question is asking. You'll be centered enough energetically and spiritually that you can go through that process of that prayer, and you'll be fine. You won't tumble to the ground. But overall, it's the most important goal. The most important goal is to be present here, and it opens up so many other doors to prioritize that in your life. And does the room have to be pitch black? Well, look, I have this video, Enlightenment. It's one of the first videos I recorded, and I'd really encourage you to look at it. A lot of it is simply to remove the distraction of being present. So pitch black helps with all sorts of things. It isn't crucial, but it does help you to disassociate from where you are and enable you to turn that into a neutral background. If you can't get it pitch black, it's okay. I'm hesitating because this isn't a goal. This isn't something I've done. So I just asked Thoth about it. It's not something I'm inclined to explore at the moment. So perhaps you're called to it. And if you are, I'm just telling you what he tells me, that it doesn't have to be black. It does help. It's most important to learn to get into your body before you explore it. And for all intents and purposes, the journey of getting into your body is the focus he'd love you to explore the most. What is it like having a 6-dimensional shared mind with your friends? Well, I know it's how I live. When I finally centered myself enough with Thoth that my mind stopped wandering and going chaotic, I've essentially come into consistent contact with the higher selves of the people I love, the soul of the people I love. We talk all day long. It's the hardest part is that none of the rest of them are fully conscious of it. I've been told repeatedly when I ask him, I volunteered for this. I volunteered for this. I volunteered for this. So there's a loneliness in it, but there's an extraordinariness in it because I get to do this. I get to be a pioneer in these ways. But the reality is everybody's soul is present and conscious. And so what you could do is you could get yourself into the plane where everyone's soul is sort of trying to operate their human life a bit as a marionette. And it's you, but it's not you. It's funny in that it's hard to steer yourself from the perspective of a higher soul. And there are a lot of advantages in having anyone in a soul group. And that's the group of beings that you incarnated with when you initially came to Earth. And to my knowledge, everybody does it that way. You come in a group and you share responsibility for each other with each other. I have gone on such a journey and awakened my relationship with my higher self enough that now I live in relation to some of the people I'm closest with, and I talk to them frequently. Now, the biggest challenge of this, and it's a unique experience to do this early in your soul group, and then the unique challenge is that there's still like spiritual debris. So the lower self of everyone gets in the way. All the karmic baggage, all the ways in which people aren't at peace with their animal creature nature get in the way. Repressed wounds, anger that people are consistently holding back, they cut in to the same vibrations. So at the same time, I get the opportunity to engage the higher soul self of the people I love the most. Often that flips into some very confused and chaotic energies and experience of I experience them emotionally as a very angry or negative or sad or wounded being. And that's a lot to handle. It's really scary. When I first got in contact with it, it was so disturbing that I continue to remember the first memory I have of I was engaging with someone who I lived with, and I was talking to her, but I dragged down into negative emotions that she had directed towards me. And I was more aware of that on a subconscious plane than I was of her words out loud. And it took me quite a while to be at peace with this and to learn to block it. So the biggest challenge in waking up this awareness is not waking up this awareness. It's in blocking it once you wake it up. Once you know you can bring some of this stuff into stillness and maintain a boundary, then you can, more consciously trust it and work with it. But until you know that, it's just chaos, and your psyche can't really afford to let it stay open. So it behooves you not to push and push and push under those circumstances. I did. I opened it early. I suffered a lot more than many people have to. And as a result, I learned lessons, and it's my job to teach other people to not suffer as much as I did. That being said, the experience of living with my friends in this way is astounding. I can remember past lives with multiple friends. And in fact, I invite you, if you access this experience, don't push it. Don't seek much. I found that when I have what I've sought, what I've pushed into tell me, I get too much information in a confused way. It's difficult to differentiate my own preconceptions from reality. And then I'm distracted in a way that's out of tune. So I encourage you to wait until it's induced. Like dreams start to open it, or you start to get flashes that are odd, that repeat phrases in your mind, and then work with those. And that often unlocks and leads to unlocking connections into a past lifetime where you have stuff that you still need to be aware of and where your attention can be healing. When you do that, there's this magnificent experience of I get to see my friends and their eyes meet mine, and I know, I love you so much. It's really deep. It's like their higher self is there looking at me. And sometimes their words reflect it. I'm not going to share that, but I've got to keep some personal boundaries, but there's definitely quite a lot of beauty in being a part of this kind of thinking with people. It is thinking all the time, which is pretty exhausting, unless and until you get to the point where you really learn to work with energy, so you can keep your attention on the spiritual resonance, and what is thoughts transforms into sort of visualization and awareness and resonant. But if typically what happens is people turn on this awareness at first, and it's just a chatter. And the instinct that I had anyway was stop it, turn it off. But the thing is, that chatter is a direct relationship to more intense energy. You don't want to turn off that more intense energy. That's part of the goal, is to be present with these more intense energies. You want to get it out of pure mental. You want to get out of a pure mental relationship with the energy and allow yourself to experience it more physically and spiritually. So that's why get in your body, do more practices, meditate, which teaches you to It doesn't turn the chatter off at first, but you focus the chatter into themes that are consistent with chakras. You focus the chakras in a way that gets the energy into your body, and then you start to visualize. It starts to become musical. It starts to integrate with your life. So you have to go through, keep going, go through. Now, I don't know if this was the initial question, because I realized this was initially directed to Thoth, but I have to tell you, he basically tricks me into taking more responsibility for other people by being like, come on, you know this, share with them. And given that this is really the goal in so many ways of being alive, our whole new phases, these 1,000 years in the future where we're helping to restore the planet, we're going to be working consciously in our soul groups. We're going to be incarnating consciously with a shared mind, working with each other in dynamic freedom, much more intense levels of intimacy and love. It's really beautiful. It's really wonderful to just even begin to see it. And as much as you can open it and bring it into balance in this lifetime, that's what we're here for. That's the work. I am confused about what you wrote about the Halls of Amenti related to the sections Halls of Life, Halls of the Dead, the Portal of Amenti, the Dark Amenti, the Land of Arufu, Cold Flower of Life, Beam of Light. Are they all separate from each other, or are some of them names of the same thing? So this is really beautiful, and I knew some of this, but basically the question helped me integrate what I already knew and took me deeper. The Halls of Amenti are halls. Think about it. Now, I think my personal standard, when I heard it, I was like the hall of a king, like a giant room where the king sits. But and so I thought that's how I interpreted it for a long time. But gradually, certainly once I went, I was introduced to the awareness that there are halls between places. So it's more like an octopus, and it's a multi-dimensional octopus. So I can only go so far with understanding this, but really you have to embrace a much broader level of awareness of how life works. Life is like circular flowing energy wrapped around mathematical linear stuff. The linear stuff is like lattices that you grow tomatoes around, or bean poles. Typically, we overemphasize the linear stuff. We try to make everything into mathematical interpretations. We misinterpret and presume genes control life, where really it's more the other way around. So the Halls of Amenti are this nexus where you can shift between dimensions that are in relationship to each other. So you are giving you a more mathematical understanding. It's up to you to kind of do the work to meditate into the way in which this is actually very vivid and living and pulsing. My best access is, if you imagine, we see in the color spectrum between red and violet. That means we see between wavelengths that are this long and this long, just 2 and 1 length, a little less than that. That's all we see. We don't see anything outside that range. Now, longer is an infrared spectrum. And then there's a whole, if you double from the wavelength of red, the color red, the red wavelength of light, you double that, that's the spectrum where the infrared begins, the spectrum of energy and light. Imagine that whole spectrum. You could take infrared photographs and you could see like heat mappings of someone. It looks totally different when you see a heat map of a person's being. It's really intense. Now you do the other way around and you look at the ultraviolet spectrum. So if red's like this is the wavelength of violet. Now you're doing half of that. So you're doing the spectrum of infrared to ultraviolet. So that's 3 octaves. And if you don't know any music theory, I highly recommend you learn some music theory, because it'll really help understand this. Because the wavelengths of music and sound are analogous to the wavelengths of light. So the Halls of Amenti enable you to shift between these kind of dimensions. So it's like saying, I live in the world of light that goes from red to violet. Now I'm going to enter the world of ultraviolet. Now it's in the same place. It's not going somewhere else, so to speak, but it's a different frequency, and all of life experience exists differently. Now, this is how it works. Not in that exact metaphor, but there are other spectrums of existence here, right here, everywhere around us. Fairy beings, aliens, they're all present. It's up to us within the boundaries that we live in and kind of be able to spectrums. It's really confusing. It can be overwhelming. The hall is at the center where you can access multiple dimensions very easily. Now, I've only looked. I haven't gone that far from there. But I do know that the cold flower of life, this is unlocking the coolest mystery, all right? It's so beautiful. The universe is not black. It's not black. There are lots of, we are seeing between this stupid little spectrum, right? Between red and violet. In the universe, spirits that move sense in completely different ways. So you don't want to use our interpretation of visuals as your primary interpretation of what reality is, because that's interpreting from within a human experience. You actually want to try to get into a spiritual experience, imagining as a spirit approaching the earth. And that was you. That was you at one point. You at one point approached the earth, so you have access to those memories. From that perspective, you sense in totally different ways, and you sense between the extremes of the sun and what we call dark matter. Dark matter is not dark. It's resonant energy, and for all intents and purposes, spiritually, it produces light, but it's cold. Now, understand, cold and hot are in relation to our human experience. That's how our feeling, our felt sense relates to them. Other beings don't relate in the same way. Cold, the mathematical consistency of what cold is stillness. As things get colder, they move more slowly. So when consciousness enters this space, anything that it's aware of is happening at an entirely different pace. And that is a whole dimension of existence where you can be. When you go into the Halls of Amenti, you can access going in this way, and going in this way, going in this way, and going in this way, in those multidimensional ways. And I'm not inclined to explore that far right now because it overwhelms me a little. So that's as far as I know on that issue. He built the pyramids. Who built the pyramid of Giza? You or Ra, or maybe both. He did. Ra is not the same order of magnitude. That was sort of a human misinterpretation. And, you know, he's actually not really pleased with me at the moment. It's not, he wouldn't want to say it's him. He did it with many beings. He was like a conductor orchestrating it. And he really wants everyone he did it with to take responsibility, to get responsibility with him, to get respect with him. It was sound meditation that enabled shifts in the relationship with gravity that moved the stones. Okay, wait. Why did the Lord 9 said that nothing is perfect? So this, I was inspired to learn to want to talk to Thoth by these books, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. I was sort of obsessed with them for several years, from when I was like 28 to when I was 32. And I got them 4 times and lost them repeatedly. And they're kind of, the guy who wrote them, I'm not like, I am so appreciative of the work he channeled. He shared a lot of ideas and then moved on. So he didn't necessarily explore everything. And then I wanted to explore some things that he didn't explore. But one of the themes that he shared was this diagram that involved a circle and then a square that touched the circle on 4 sides, and then another circle that touches the points of the square, and then a bigger square that touches the circle on all sides. Now draw this to get in deeper relationship with it. But there was like 5 of those in relationship. This is a primary way you need to shift dimensions when you're not going through a nexus like the Halls of Amenti. So in this way, you have to sort of step. And Thoth, in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, talks about running from predatory forces, and he escaped by moving through circles and curves while they chased after him with angles. This is really intense, and it's a way of prioritizing consciousness that wraps around mathematical structures that are linear, and ones that are curved and more flowing and alive in this way. Perfection is in relationship to an overemphasis on the logical mind. When the very conception of perfection exists in relationship to an unhealthy relationship to life. Life is based on unfluid organicness. Look around you. Everywhere, what the earth makes is full of curves and broken, and trees are not even symmetrical. Human beings aren't even symmetrical perfectly. And we're built of these curves and forms and waves. Living energy that gets to experience life with a flow between each other, connected, interrelated, dancing artistically, is an entirely different experience than consciousness that wraps itself around lines. And they're not vague about emphasizing this part of the experience, that they're not equal. That's a way to move between conscious dimensions. Staying with the curves involves surrendering any idea of perfection. Don't measure in that way. You're appreciating that every tree is different. You're appreciating what happens. And it's this relationship with reality that involves surrendering what you want to the world and creating together, co-creation. Now, there's a lot of value in an exercise that taught me and that I teach and I've taught in classes, where you meditate on the solar plexus, which is the center of intention. And the solar plexus in the key ring is followed by the diamond eye at the top of the forehead. This is a center of dreaming and visions. So when you create an intention, you can naturally shift that energy really easily through, it's a natural progression, just like in music. So you can naturally shift that energy really easily to the diamond eye. And what you're doing is saying, I have this intention, I create it, I lift it, and I surrender it into dream time. I'm surrendering it to the earth herself. And I'm saying, let's test this out. Let's try it. And what you get is a response that is not just yours. And she shapes it with you. Now, the most dramatic example I've ever had was that before I met my wife, I went to a gathering where I met my wife and another woman. And I was really hoping to find my partner, and they both affected me quite dramatically. And for the next several months, I was like, still sort of learning to want to commit. And several weeks later, I guess, I had this vivid dream. And in the dream, I was 2.5, it was very specific. I was 2.5 years into a relationship with this other woman. And she was exhausted. She was really tired. She was tired of me. I was a lot to handle, and she loved me. I knew it. I knew her. I knew her moods. I knew her ways. We lived this. We lived it. And it was absolutely clear to me that she was extremely loving, cared for me deeply, had totally given her best, and it wasn't going to work. So I surrendered it. I'm like, that was enough. I knew that wouldn't work. And within a very short amount of time, my wife called me and asked me out. So that is the most dramatic example I have of how the earth wants us to live. You just completely disregard constantly bringing yourself towards a standard. When you co-create with something that you could call perfect, you're co-creating with something that's not alive. You want to co-create with, you're constantly trying to bring yourself to a drawing. If you make a drawing of something that you want to be real and alive, but you keep trying to bring yourself back to the drawing, it's like you're conforming a three-dimensional thing to a two-dimensional thing. It's undermining the value of what you're trying to create. Instead, you want to make a drawing, say, hey, Gaia, what do you think? And she's going to give you something back, and it'll be different. Sometimes she'll say no. Sometimes she'll rip it up. In fact, it wouldn't work unless you gave her that level of respect and appreciation that she could destroy your intentions. You have to be willing to surrender on that level in order to get into the depth of dialogue and co-creative power that is possible. Otherwise, it just doesn't, you won't ever get access to it. So all these people, the law of attractive manifestors, oh my God, there's like 10,000 videos online about this shit, and they're all missing the boat that I've seen. Now, then there's some that start to talk about this, but there's this whole range of people that they're trying to make what they want, and that is their version of power. I asked for this, and I got this. And let me tell you, I went through a phase of that 20 years ago, 18 years ago, okay? Some really amazing stuff. Like I was invited to Burning Man and I didn't have enough money. So I literally told a beautiful woman who'd invited me that I couldn't go. And she was totally disappointed in me. We'd already done 2 fundraisers that I'd bartended at and performed at, but I still didn't feel like I had enough money. So I was like, fine. And I wrote a prayer for $2,000. I concluded I needed $2,000. So I wrote a prayer, put it under a candle, lit the candle, and said I was going to leave that candle until it burned out. So it lasted a couple days. And soon after it went out, someone knocked on my door and said, wow, I was looking through your window and I love the way you've painted your house. It's perfect for us. Could we rent your home for a day and film a commercial? So this team of 40 people and a truck and a food truck, and they gave us food and lights that was 2 stories high pointing through the thing. He's telling me all this, and I'm like, how much? And he said, we'll give you $1,500. And I said, how about 2,000? And he gave it to me. He gave it to me. So I went to Burning Man for my first time, and I learned more about manifesting things there. But the first lesson I learned was to put my intentions into reality and let them be changed. And for the next couple of years, I manifested. I was vacillating between trust and co-creation and wanting the power of manifestation, which I'm equating with perfection. That's where I'm going with all this. It's like when you're manifesting, you're trying to be able to be perfect. You're trying to create into reality in relation to this pure standard of some sort. I was trained to recognize that a huge part of the problem is we don't know enough to use this power well. In fact, we exist within the earth, so it's always best to co-create with her. Even if we get almost exactly what we ask for, it's always best to surrender it to her with the humility that she might know something that we don't know. And again, I would manifest things that were exactly what I wanted and find out, oh my God, like this comes with so many burdens that I didn't understand. I definitely recommend you not overuse this with relationships, because I manifested women who were categories, fire spitter, dancer, musician, like I made a list of what I was attracted to, and then I found it and I got her, and it was explosive, and then it crashed, because you can't fall in love based on lists. You fall in love based on organic. Lists are mathematical in this way. You can't put that primary. It's great to share things that you like, but it's also good to let go of that and let life show you that you may want something else. And when I finally met my wife, I actually made a much more humble prayer and said, I'm making mistakes with my relationships. Can you please show me what I need? I said, show me what's best for me. And my wife is much more grounded than I am. She's much more, ironically enough, rhythm-based, and she guides me to be much more disciplined. And I've written so much since I've been with her. I've made so many videos. I've taught classes. I've performed 150 times. I've done all sorts of things that I never did before because she has this discipline. But I wasn't asking for someone to inspire me with discipline. That's not sexy. I was asking for da-da-da-da, yogis, da-da-da-da. And I kept getting it and it didn't work well. So this is all by way of saying, when you really embrace the depth of what it is to live on Earth, you want to transcend any concept that you're aiming for perfections. Weed it. You're going to have to weed it out of your mind. You'll find it's infiltrated all sorts of thought processes and it gets in your way. I just did a yoga class, and I'm adamant that yoga is one of the best places to teach this, because people get it in their head, concepts of perfection in relation to yoga poses, but every day is different. And if you are thinking about lists of adjustments, you're going to be out of tune with what your body actually needs, what your breath actually needs. If you've got a standard that you want to achieve this, this, and this, you're going to push past your intuitive limits and break things that you need. And I find repeatedly I set standards and intentions. I still do it. I set intentions. Today I met them. I wanted to do 25 sun salutations with what I call sun surrenders. I add poses in them. And I met that. But I also knew that today was a good day to do that. Often I found that it's much healthier to set an intention, get down on the mat, find out today is not the day for that. I need something much more fluid, much more yin. I don't want that level of structure. My body, my spirit has something else to show me. And you can learn to tune into this through yourself. So if you're obsessed with getting your arm perfect, you're going to overstretch because you're reaching for that external measurement of perfection without recognizing that your arm's actually saying, don't do that to me now. Your arm might be saying, stay right here. You got something to open. And that's more important than your goal to get into triangle pose at a certain depth in that day. So forgive me for those of you who don't practice or study yoga. That won't make sense. But that's an awesome point to get into a very valuable change in how to live really well on the earth, in your body at this time as a human. Let go of perfection. Throw it away. Make good, clear intentions and plans and ideas. Surrender them and learn to watch for the reply and what it has to tell you about how you can make new choices, different choices, better choices, and actually get a better life than you were asking for, which is the goal. Okay, you said that you went to the 8th state. What is that like, and what is the 8th state? Basically, he said, don't bother. Don't think about it. It would just confuse you. It would just confuse me. Stay focused on these transitions. You're working with. It is helpful to say 5th and 6th dimensional awareness. 5th and 6th being both spirit and soul levels is the easiest way to relate it. You're thinking beyond this lifetime to recognize different incarnations, and you're integrating that in your experience of being alive. You're getting access to a broader range of energies because we experienced different lifetimes in different frequency ranges purposefully, because there are all sorts of lessons that were isolated in different frequency ranges, like we incarnate in different times to work through layers of violence. You don't want that violence present in the middle of your existence in other states. So once you get access to these different ranges of awareness, it's plenty to tackle. So don't try to think beyond that. Just worry about getting yourself in tune with your awakening soul, your awakening light access to your soul's experience of incarnating as a spirit into many different human lifetimes. That is a lot, and it's enough to worry about. And just leave his extremes for much longer in the future. When you said akasa, did you mean chakra? No, but there is some relationship to that. What he said, I didn't know this, but what he said was that is vaguely like a chakra is to him. So he wouldn't say he has chakras. That's closer to what it is for him. It's much more multidimensional. Enough you can allow it to evolve to access a much broader range of frequencies. Again, I encourage you to study some music theory to understand how octaves work in relationship to each other, Y is a C and a C and a C. Like if you double a wavelength again, those are all called C notes on the piano. So there are 7 C notes, and that's doubling 7 times, going down. The low notes are bigger, high notes are shorter. So learn some about that, and it really helps to understand these other themes. As you know, I'm putting together an animation about your emerald tablets. Can you help me in closely capturing the faces of people and spirit, the places, and some of the events that happened, because it is hard for me to capture these details from the tablets alone. This is really beautiful. Like, look, I'm honored to play this role for you. It's simple but clear. He's just encouraging you to trust his presence, like he's looking over your shoulder. So as you sketch things out, I don't know what your creative process is, but give yourself some freedom to sketch and do rough drafts, whether you're meditating on it or using a pen or whatever, or on the computer, but be a little bit freeform, play around, and trust that his presence is influencing you. And then ease up on trying to be perfect. Trust that your interpretation is really valuable. It's going to be valuable in a way that brings out the truth. So use that lesson about perfection, like worry less about being perfect in relation to what actuality was, because what actually happened in these many themes is just well beyond what we can see anyway. Really get out of the vision. Human vision is a very narrow spectrum. Plenty of beings see, quote unquote, in a much broader range of frequencies. It's a specific choice. It's a specific way of being to incarnate with a primary visual interpretation of reality that exists between 1 octave. It's a very, very specific experience. So let go of that as your primary metaphor for understanding his experience and everything that's related in the tablets. Get in to being creative, give yourself creative freedom, and trust that he's going to be there helping you influence it, and then leading you into respecting that the interpretations that flow and that feel pretty good to you, let that be. Trust that it's divine, it's good. Be with it and move on. Try not to aim for anything that you'd think of as perfection. Thoth, you have used someone who works with the tarot to tell me that you will give me something in writing. Am I ready to receive that writing? How will you give it to me? So this is really, I don't know where you are in your process. So this is obviously being more specific to the person who asked the questions, because you, Unique Ornaments, have asked such wonderful questions that have really inspired me. I'm happy to do this right now. I'm not at a certain point. I would honestly love to be inundated with so many questions that I couldn't answer such specific questions for people, unless they paid me for a session. But the inspiration of the general questions about the tablets is so awesome that I'm just happy to do this. And your work in this is really cool, and I'm excited to see what you create. He encourages me to share what happened to me, because he's going to try to do this for you. I first received messages from him that I would describe it to my astonished and overwhelmed friends as I was getting a light ball. So it's like a light ball would just like pop into my consciousness, and I would just sort of be present with it. And then I would have like a paragraph, just a paragraph. And it was usually really clear that paragraph did a decent job of conveying what I learned in that light ball, which came instantly. And I would be able to groove with that paragraph for extended periods of time, like weeks sometimes. I went through a couple of years of that. It was a major phase for me. And that is how you can trust that. You shouldn't seek it. It worked because I was being pretty receptive. I will say I neither encouraged nor discouraged this. At the time, I was smoking pot a couple times a week. that had some relationship, I was often more open at those times. I was the guy who, like, I would have deep, intense things with my friends when we were high. The next day they'd go, "Whoa, I can't believe all that shit." And I'd go, "Wait, I still believe all that." So I was like really like gripping on to what I learned. If that's not part of your flow, I wouldn't encourage you to do it, but that is what I did at the time. But it also came without it, for sure. I just really learned to become attentive. So be open to that process. It is distinct. You don't need to struggle. You don't need to try. And these single paragraphs influenced me a ton. And I believe that's what he has in store for you. Unfortunately, I know you asked 3 other questions, but unfortunately, I do have to go. And there wasn't anything. I meditated for a while. There wasn't anything that I haven't worked in. I worked everything else he wanted me to share into these answers. I sort of, spun out in different directions based on some of the questions. And I hope that was valuable for anyone who's been watching this. Thank you for this time, because I've been looking forward to doing this for a while. This is, believe it or not, I believe both my calling and my business plan to eventually do live question answer sessions and receive donations while I do. Like, I've watched other people do this and they get donations doing it. So I'd love to have enough people that's a viable way for me to share my work and buy some food. So thank you for being here. It's really cool to move through the boundary. I've been nervous to do it. Now we've done 2 in 2 days, and I'm hopeful that anyone who's watched this far or who watches it in the future will study the channel. Everything on the channel is stemming from lessons I've learned spiritually in these ways. They're intended as building blocks so that I can do these live casts and refer you to those videos and, like, go learn that. We'll talk about it. And at any time, in any way that you have questions about those, if you post them, I'll use it for future videos and future live casts in this way. So thanks for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Please cherish your creative spirit during these wild times. Much love. Be with you and your family.